If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires it upfield, caught over the middle. Michael Pittman Jr., there he goes! He's at the 40, he's at the 30, slips out of a tackle, 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Michael Pittman Jr. takes it 75 yards to the house. Big run, angling left, 40, he's at the 30, down the near sideline, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor, a 49-yard gallop to pay dirt.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Welcome, everyone, to the official Colts Podcast. We're back. We're back with J.J. Stankevitz. Larra Overton is here, and I'm smelling football right around the corner. Days away from Grand Park, the Colts training camp will start. I just got to get the fire up level out of you two because last week, the week before, we had the holidays and we're getting ready and stuff. And after that swing happened, and we went, oh, we're 8 days away. Oh, we're 9 days away. Everything changes right now because our focus changes. Obviously, the players change. But, guys, fired up or not, because this thing is coming right around the corner.
I always get excited for, this week, just to have the guys back in the building. There is nothing like the energy that there is that first day, that morning when everyone's showing up at Grand Park. It kind of feels like the first day back to school when you're a kid and you're seeing all of your friends for the first time since summer break. And a lot of these guys, we heard them say that last practice of mini camp where the Colts camp was set up to ask them, hey, what are you doing on summer break? And everyone was like, it's not summer break. This is summer work. We know that this group has been so locked in, even in the time that they have been off in their various destinations, training elsewhere and all of that. So now it's time to hit the ground running. And you can tell that although it's been, 6 months since the end of the season, there's that hunger that's left from how things finished in the 2023 season that is going to heavily motivate the start of training camp.
I'm excited just for something new to talk about.
There you go.
Honestly, we've been sitting here on this couch for the last 6 months kind of talking about the same stuff.
Yep.
Because that's, you're analyzing every nook and cranny of that 2023 season. For me, training camp, it's the start of the 2024 season. I know we had OTAs and all that, but this is where you get into the real new stuff now. And, okay, what does Anthony Richardson actually look like during a practice? How does Latu look when the pads get on? You're actually going to learn some stuff about this team that's a little bit more tangible than you can get during OTAs. So I'm next week when we get up to Grand Park, I'm going to be the same way, Larry. Just
yeah, let's go.
We're back. Let's go.
Time.
And then we'll get 2 weeks into training camp, and I'm like, okay, when does the season start?
Right.
Do you think anybody comes in with an exciting entrance? That was always the Reggie signature, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the different ways he came into training camp.
Who would? If we had to guess, who do you think?
Kenny came in on a Indy car a couple years ago.
Yes,
that was cool.
And then obviously Shaq Leonard would always drive in one of his cool vintage cars type of thing, but I want that. I'm hoping that somebody would do that. And I remember asking Reggie a number of years ago, did you pass that torch to anyone? Did you expect that anyone would pick that up? But it had become such a him thing, a signature Reggie thing, that he thought that perhaps T.Y. Hilton might be the next guy to embrace that. But it was such an iconic Reggie characteristic and practice that he would have that I think everyone felt like the bar was set a little bit too high to continue to rise up, because we had the dump truck, that he came in on, the two-seater with Ed Carpenter, I think, one year. I'm looking at Kevin Connors behind the camera because he knows all of these. The helicopter entrance one year, all of those different things.
Right.
So I don't know. I just I want, even if somebody is rolling in on a tricycle or something.
I have
an
idea.
know.
You know how up on 191st Street, sometimes you'll get caught behind a tractor that's going from farm to farm?
Yeah. Combine.
How about Michael Pittman Jr.?
Love that.
Take the tractor to work.
Or
the forklift.
Or a horse.
Or a horse.
He's
got options.
That'd be pretty
good.
good.
I'm saying.
If you guys are listening, do something nice around training camp because it gives us more to talk about. But how about Bernard Ryman skydiving into Grand Park, something like that?
I know a vehicle Bernard Ryman could borrow.
I'm just saying.
There are people equipped with Austrian-built military vehicles.
That's true. Oh, yeah, that's
on
right.
this podcast.
That is. Oh, boy. JJ, before we get moving on, we do have some camp questions and a training camp preview. Tell us about the move. It's a successful podcast that you did, the documentary on the Colts move from Baltimore to Indianapolis. All 4 episodes are out right now, available on the Colts Audio Network. Congratulations, a lot of success. What's been the feel the last 3 weeks when people have been telling you, hey, I finally listened to it and finished it?
A lot of relief.
Yeah?
Just because so much work went into it. We put days, weeks, months into this project.
Sure.
to do the story justice, not just for Indianapolis, but for Baltimore. And I got a call from John Zeman, who's featured heavily in the podcast. He's a former leader of the Colt marching band, who called me over the weekend to say, hey, I talked to some people in Baltimore, and believe it or not, they liked it.
Nice. Okay.
So
I was going to say, I didn't know if when we play the Ravens on the road, next time, I don't know if you're going to need security or not.
No,
so.
I mean, I hope not.
Yeah, I don't think so. No, really, great job on that.
Thank you.
I mean, there was a lot of hard work and a lot of effort. You, Matt Taylor, Casey in the background, among many others that were, but you put in the hard work, and congratulations on that.
Yeah, and, it's really about the voices of the people who are in it, who lived it, and one aside here is I got to talk with Jim Morris before he passed away.
Yeah.
Jim Morris passed away over the weekend. I had a chance to sit down with him to talk with him back in June for this podcast. And, it's about honoring the legacies of these people who took the risks, especially here in Indianapolis, to build a stadium without a team and to to push all this support and funding into downtown to make Indianapolis's downtown what it is today, which is a really fantastic place to go. And it was a really rewarding project to put together. If you haven't listened to it, it's all available on the Colts Audio Network, like you said.
Yeah, not only that, here's what I like about it, and then we'll move on. There was a couple of, I don't know, what do they call, Gen Zers or whatever, youngsters in their 20s that had listened to that didn't have any idea about this thing, and they were saying, I had no clue until I listened to this, all the steps that went into it. So you're reaching different generations with that.
It's an important story to tell, not just here, but in Baltimore and for the entire NFL.
Yep, great job. Larra, we're going to talk about a little training camp preview, but you sat down recently with somebody, and Colts fans, you're going to want to know about this gentleman and who he works with. Tell us about Coach Eddy.
Yeah, Coach Eddy McGilvra, he is based in California and has become one of the pass rush gurus across football, primarily with the NFL, also working with some college guys, including Latu when he was going into his career at UCLA. Eddy goes into the story of how he initially met Laiatu, but he's also worked with Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Dayo Adangbo, Adetomo Adebawore. He is very familiar with this Colts defensive line, and we'll get into this maybe after the interview, but I also talk to him a little bit about the influence of Coach Charlie Partridge and his respect for Gus Bradley and what this whole defensive front will look like now with the continuity of the majority of this defensive line coming back, another season with Gus Bradley, the influence of Coach Partridge, and what Latu will inject into this group. He is absolutely incredible. It was so fun to get to spend some time talking to him because I have been an admirer of his work, just following him on social media. I think it's interesting that we're seeing a lot more of these specialized coaches who are willing to share some of their training on various platforms, and you'll see the guys who they are working with sharing things across, Twitter, across Instagram, all of those things. And there's no gatekeeping to this where it's like, oh no, we're going to keep what we do secret. I think it's really cool that Coach Eddy McGilvra is like, no, I hope that people are, that young players across the country are watching the good things that these players are doing and the work that it takes and the training and the practice and all of these things. Also, one of the guys who Latu recently worked with before coming back to Indy, because he's back now, Khalil Mack.
Yeah, my guy right there.
Okay.
I was so excited to send you that clip. D-line coach Ed tweeted this out over the weekend. It was a clip of him working with Khalil Mack, and I was just immediately sent that to you. I have so much respect for Khalil Mack, seeing how he worked and he operated when he was with the Bears and I was covering the Bears. That guy's just an absolute pro. He is a menace on the defensive line, an absolute technician. So what guy just to even watch him go about his business? Who better than Khalil Mack for Latu to look up to?
Exactly. And one thing that I asked Coach Eddy about that we get into is what does it say about Laiatu that you have an absolute legend, a likely future Hall of Famer, right? That he's going to be willing to spend really valuable time in his offseason, hey, here's what I can help you with and those things. And Eddy and I had a conversation about how, significant it is as a coach when you have, those who you have worked with who then embrace the opportunity to coach others. And they're, this art of the pass rush and the priority on the pass rush, because of what we have seen over the last decade or so with the evolution of offenses, there is a heavier and heavier priority on the guys who are really good at this. And this is one of the absolute best to do it. And he has some great insight on a number of guys on this
Colts
defensive line, Kwity Paye included.
For sure. and Eddy McGilvra. That's coming up in a bit. You're not going to want to miss that. Colts are loaded with talent on that defensive line. Obviously, welcome Latu to the mix. But these things change, JJ. Storylines change. We're 9 days out right now. Go ahead. Give me the storyline that you're most concerned about right now. Because if I ask you in 10 days from now, I think it could be different.
Well, and this is defense. This is on defense.
Okay.
Next week we're doing the offense
okay,
for the preview. So we're sticking to defense today. So if you're wondering why I'm not about to say Anthony Richardson,
sure.
It's because this is a defensive-focused pod.
Let me check my notes again a little bit more next time that we're – but I kind of now we narrow it down to both sides of the ball. Here we go, defensively speaking.
All right, so it's the cornerbacks.
Yep.
It's that to me this is the number one competition we're going to be following during training camp is what happens at outside corner. Yeah, obviously we know Kenny Moore is going to be in the slot when the Colts are in nickel, which they are in most of the time. When they're in base with two corners, Kenny's going to be on the outside. We'll have someone else playing there. But you kind of have these three contenders for two spots is the way that I look at it between Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, and Dallas Flowers. Those three guys are probably vying for two spots. I think Juju probably has a leg up on one of them because of his ability to play man coverage. If you look at it last year, I ran these numbers from Pro Football Focus. Juju had the second highest Pro Football Focus coverage grade in man in the NFL among cornerbacks. He was like 0.2% behind Tariq Woolen on Seattle. He was ahead of Sauce Gardner. He was ahead of Derek Stingley. He was ahead of Patrick Surtain, some really good players there. Now, he only played about 22% of his snaps in man. So there is maybe room for Juju to play more, get a bigger sample size, but that was a really encouraging start in terms of Juju's ability to play man coverage, which I think helps him out on one side of that battle.
One follow-up to you. How much does special teams come into play with Dallas Flowers and the ways he can be utilized?
It's a really good question because that's the kickoffs is the sort of great unknown.
Yeah,
right?
And not to jump ahead because I know we have that in our
no,
rundown.
It's a really important question where the kickoffs are kind of a play in and of itself. It's not like you can just stick a guy back there. He'll return it 6 times a year, and you're not worried about.
You're treating it like a first down.
Absolutely. So if Dallas Flowers becomes your kickoff guy, does that impact your willingness to play him every single snap of a game at cornerback? That's a really interesting question. We're going to kind of get into that with the kickoffs because that's another really wide open, complete unknown. The thing on the other side, so I think if Juju, and the big thing for Juju, right, has always been staying healthy.
Yes.
Like that was his issue last year. He's got to be available. He's got to be on the field. He's got to be able to practice and play. But I think if he can do those things, I think he's got a real good shot to start at corner for the Colts. The opposite spot, I think, is between Jones and Flowers. And both those guys last year did good things. I know that there's a lot of concern about why did the Colts go and sign a cornerback. Baseline, those two guys did a really good job limiting explosive plays. So neither of them were really taking the ball away. Neither of them were maybe making a ton of plays on the ball. You know, Flowers kind of got there toward the end of his season before he got hurt. But Dallas Flowers last year, he only allowed one completion of 15 or more yards. Among cornerbacks with 150 or more coverage snaps, that was 5th fewest. His explosive play rate allowed of 0.06% or 0.6%. Jalen Jones also did a good job. He allowed 8 plays of 15 or more yards, but he also allowed 5.8 yards per coverage target. So essentially, every time he got targeted, whether it was complete or incomplete, teams are averaging 5.8 yards throwing the ball toward him. That was 9th lowest among cornerbacks. So again, he's not allowing explosive plays. And I think baseline, if you can just say that opposite corner spot is not giving up big plays, they're not busting all the time, I think that's a good starting point for that position.
My 2 cents on this thing is we've got a veteran like Kenny Moore in there that everyone looks up to in that room and stuff. But who's the next guy? Obviously we want Juju to be that guy, and I do think it is that year for Juju Brents. Health-wise aside, that he stays on the field and does what he does. I think we have that second corner that we start looking up to that is consistent, that starts every day. Because right now it's like, hey, I'm fighting for playing time. It's got to be the mentality of these young men when they're going in there. But I want that solid guy that says, this is my position. I'm locking it down for the next 6 years. Everybody else get away from me. And I hope we find that this camp with the defensive backfield.
Yeah, and I think that you would have seen seen, if they didn't have the belief in that group that's already in the room, you would have seen, more movement certainly in this offseason. And the other thing to keep in mind is the roster's not set until it's set. There could still be things that happen depending on those critical few weeks of, the first few weeks of camp, those evaluation periods through joint practices, through preseason games, all of that. So it'll be very telling whether or not there is a move made after the second to third week of camp.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's kind of that. There are a lot of veterans out there, right?
Yeah.
Who have not signed, and a lot of times those guys will wait until a week or two into camp to assess situations.
Don't make me name names.
Well, right. We're not going to here. But those guys, you see how some competitions are playing out. You see if, a team reaches out and says, we're really not liking what we're getting out of position X. Can you come in and solidify that for us? I think that's, you see a lot of those guys who wait a little bit because it's like there's really no difference for them in signing on July 15th versus August 15th. They're still training. Yeah, you have to get up to speed a little bit quicker, but the players who are still out there they're all veterans. They all have played thousands of snaps in the NFL. The acclimation period is going to be a little bit quicker than someone who's coming, with maybe 2-3 years of experience.
Yeah. Guys, we're talking about, storylines and whatnot. We're going to hear from Coach Eddy McGilvra coming up. Larra had a chance to sit down with him. I'm going to go to the defensive line because obviously we're talking about Latu and Kwity and the stuff that they do. But before we go to that, give me something on. I'm trying to. When Grover and DeForest are in the game, that wall, that DeForest, that when they're next to each other, it's a rare thing in the NFL that they bring. And now you're bringing in another big body, and I want to talk about him specifically and what he brings. And I'm talking about Raekwon Davis and what he can bring to the interior if one of these guys does go down and. That size that we didn't have last year, with him that we have now, how much of a difference is that for this defensive line?
I mean, you're always guarding against attrition, right, with a depth signing like Raekwon Davis, but the Colts gave him a sizable contract to be a reserve defensive tackle. I think they envision him rotating in pretty heavily with that group, where, that then hopefully you keep Grover and Buck fresher. Because the Colts also see him being able to play both those spots, the 1-tech and the 3-tech, and having a little more pass rushing upside than he had in Miami, where he was mostly playing kind of this 2-gapping in the middle of a 3-4 defense that doesn't really allow you to rush the passer as a nose tackle there. So he's a really important piece to this whole puzzle that I think baseline you want him to be there to not have a huge drop-off in play from when you need to rotate Grover Buck out, but you still get, good play. It's not just like, all right, he's baseline, fine. It's like, no, you're still getting good play when he comes into the game.
Well, Larra, it's time. I want to see and listen to what happened with you and Coach Eddy McGilvra. And this is a guy that's working with a lot of the Colts defensive front right now, and obviously with Kwity, Paye, and Latu like that. And I'm just saying, we have a guy to thank maybe in 7-8 months from now, 9 months from now, when the Colts are on top of the hill, and it could be one of these sessions. But let's catch up right now. Here's Larra Overton with Coach Eddy McGilvra.
Defensive line guru who is in demand all across the country, working with a number of Colts, most notably recent draft pick Latu. Defensive line coach Eddy McGilvra joins us on the official Colts podcast. We mentioned it. You have worked with some of the top defensive linemen in the country, within the NFL, also in college football. When you started working with Laiatu, how far back does this relationship go? Because I know you're, a Southern California-based guy, and he obviously, had some of his college career there at UCLA.
Yeah. So, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Laiatu and I go back to, I do a lot of my off-season program at UCLA on their grounds. And I was training one of my veterans there. And he was like, hey, I got a guy I played with at Washington. He transferred to UCLA. Can he jump into our sessions? And I was like, yeah, come on out. Like, if a college guy ever wants to jump in, let's see what he's all about. And he had us jaw dropped, like with his movements, and you see it every time you watch the tape, but he does all that like it's nothing, like it's second nature to him. So that's kind of when we connected, and I just told him, I grabbed him aside and I was like, hey man, like keep doing what you're doing because you've got a bright future, and hopefully we can keep working. And we've been locked in ever since.
And how long ago was that?
This was, I want to say, after his junior year. So it was the winter time, right after they finished season. He was with me all spring, all summer, and then we just stayed in touch throughout the process.
And obviously, he was navigating through all of his injury issues and all of that during that period of time. One of the things that we learned from him when he came into the building and, immediately got to work, we've seen how hungry and how eager he is. I know that you have witnessed that firsthand. He talked about that early on, a lot of his training would be done by observing YouTube videos and trying to replicate what he learned, being such a student of the game and how eager he has been to refine a lot of what he's able to do. When you first saw him, how raw was he? And maybe how high of a ceiling did you see when, oh man, if we can get some fine tuning on this guy and his skill set and his pass rush, what the possibilities might be for a guy of this caliber?
Very raw, but also very visual. He learns through his visual. And so he would see other guys take reps and pass rush, and he would see kind of them take a step here or move their shoulders or hands in a direction, bend a corner, and he would just try to emulate that. And he's a very quick learner. Something I noticed about him early on in the process of training him was he's able to grow and get better within the reps that he's taking at that current session. And not a lot of guys are able to do that. It usually maybe takes like 2, maybe 3 sessions. So he's a step ahead almost every time he takes a training session. I think that's why his development happens so fast for him. He's so key on visual learning. But you can tell when he's watching tape of himself, he'll watch himself and be, I didn't like that. And he'll take it back out to the field and correct it. So I think, like I said, very raw, but just quickly learning. And then he became obsessed with the techniques. And once he started getting obsessed with the techniques, he just started to put it to play. And we saw it his senior year at UCLA. He was really able to get after the quarterback.
Plenty of other Colts who you've worked with as well, and we'll get into a few of those in just a minute. But one thing with your interesting perspective and the time that you have had in working with Laiatu through his college career, and then in particular, preparation for the draft, that, the combine process, the pro days, how differently maybe have you specialized things from the spring when he was getting ready for that period, the pre-draft process, to now knowing the system he's going to be in, knowing the guys who he's going to be lining up alongside with this Colts front?
So I've been doing pre-draft process, like I like to call it that, like since 2018 was my first class. And you realize that there's not that much football happening in that process. It's more like, don't break the Ferraris, make sure they're just fast, ready to go. But with guys like Latu who want to get better and want to keep going, and you kind of got to pull them back sometimes a little bit because they want to train so much. He's able to get a lot through the process. But the shift from training for a combine or training for a pro day or getting ready for interviews into, hey, let's go get ready for football. For him, he's just hungry. Like I said, he's obsessed for that. So he can't wait for that process. The other day, he had said to me, he was just smiling on the field, and I was like, what's up? Why are you smiling so hard? He was like, because this stuff is getting really real. Like, I can't wait to get back out there and just play football again. Like, he's really obsessed with the game, and you can see it within his actions every single day, the way he approaches his day to day. But it's pretty awesome to see it.
One of the guys that you've worked with, Kwity Paye, and I knew that Kwity had shared some time in the spring with Laiatu, and I traded some texts with him the night that Laiatu was drafted about Kwity's excitement to be sharing a room, with Laiatu among the other incredible guys who were in that room as well. And just paraphrasing, a couple things he said is, immediate impact is immediately going to make a difference. We're becoming the best defensive line in the NFL. What stands out to you about the time that you have spent with Kwity, and what would you say maybe about now, from the guys who you've spent time with as well, how strong this group is becoming thanks to the investment that's being made in the front?
Well, Kwity actually has probably had the best offseason with any of my veterans I've ever had throughout this process. And since 2018, since I've been doing this, it's not even close. He's completely changed his mentality, and I think that really came first. So he's more locked in than ever. He's very hyper focused on his body. He's in tune with what he needs to do to get his body right. He's healthy. It was really his first full healthy offseason with me since his rookie year. And he's improved every year. I think the mentality side of it, though, really shifted. Like, I know he texted me and was like, man, I feel different mentally. And it's looked incredible. Everybody that's been around him throughout this process, whether it's his strength trainers or body people, his yoga instructors, his Pilates instructors, they've all said the same thing. Even his like business manager, who I'm close with, everybody is really, really high on the offseason Kwity Paye's had. And I think a lot of it had to do with, the Colts drafting somebody like Laiatu, and now he gets to spend time around a guy like Latu and gets to see, man, this guy's love for the game and joy for the game has really inspired me to be a better player and to take this a little bit maybe more seriously, or just lock in on a different level. And he looks incredible. I am extremely high on the Kwity Paye train right now. I am very excited for him.
We love hearing that, especially when it's a group that set the single season franchise sack record last year. Most of those guys are back. That group is now reinforced with Laiatu, Latu, a number of the other guys that you've met, that you have worked with, Samson Ebukam, Dayo Adengbo, and Tamawa Adebare, all of those current Colts who are, coming back, and they're going to report here to training camp next week, immediately getting to work. I was reading an article in which it's like 2.5 seconds essentially that pass rushers get to a quarterback before the ball is released. When you have such a limited amount of time, how specialized is the training to refine every single millisecond of that process and making sure that you are as efficient and effective as possible in doing that?
I think it's extremely specific, but also you don't want to over technologize, if that's a word, these athletes. Like, they're so good at what they do, and they're so big and fast and strong. You just want to make sure you sharpen their tools, and make sure that it's almost a repetitive grind. And I sometimes have to check myself and be like, man, okay, we're doing the same thing again and again and again. Just making sure I don't get content with what we're doing and making sure we're pushing them. But these guys are bought in and they're locked into what they have to do to get to the quarterback. And I think their biggest tool will always be their confidence. And I think that's something that I always try to leave them with before they leave California is, hey, make sure you're confident in what you're doing, because it's been working for you throughout this program. Let's make sure we take that into training camp and throw your move and take risks and do things that you were doing out here and make sure it's translating. Those guys also getting to train together is awesome. I think that's just a very underrated part of their chemistry. I saw it last year between Kwity and Dayo, both of them having their best years. They were locked in all spring with me. They were here for, I think it was like 3 straight months, just going, 4 or 5 days a week of training and spending time together off the field. So adding somebody like Latu into that mix that you mentioned, those guys already have a chemistry. They already understand each other. And I think that's a huge part of pass rush, because if you understand how the guy next to you wants to get to the quarterback, it's only going to help you work off of his rushes and vice versa.
And this is a franchise that has long appreciated the art of the pass rush, with Dwight Freeney, who's going to go into the Hall of Fame, of course, next month, Robert Mathis, a number of the guys who we can spotlight. And one of the things that I've heard from defensive coordinator Gus Bradley is, in terms of scheming your defense and, attacking the passer and different things, is you're always kind of trying to stay one step ahead and anticipate how offenses are evolving. How will we really see maybe even more refinement and more of a priority on maybe the art of the pass rush and what different guys are doing? Because it really does seem that there has been a greater priority and, maybe a greater appreciation across the league for what these pass rushers are able to do and how they can completely change the game plan for an offense.
It just makes it easy, like if you don't have to blitz, and you've got 4 guys, if you got 4 guys up there that can just go, it makes it easy. I know Gus loves doing that. So, it fits well when you have 4 guys or 5 guys in your rotation that can just pin their ears back and go. But as far as I think every year I've seen this, there's more and more guys really investing their time in the offseason to become true, artists of pass rush. And there's a lot of good trainers out there. I'm one of many. And I see it all the time. I see new guys going out there, adding tools to their bag, coming out, having huge breakout seasons year after year. And it feels like almost every single team across the league now has 3 to 4 rushers that can just get after the quarterback. And it's becoming a beautiful thing in my eyes.
You mentioned you're one of many specialized pass rush coaches across the country. And you said, 2018 was your first year, your first offseason?
Yeah.
I mean, this has been such quick. Following that you have amassed. I know you've got guys DMing you on Instagram all across the country wanting to work with you. How have you built this program in such a following in seemingly such a quick period of time?
I think the majority of it comes from the success from the players, and I never forget that at the end of the day, it's about the guys and it's about their success equaling my success, and we get to eat together. But I think I just work well with certain guys, and guys enjoy my style of coaching. I'm not necessarily too hard. It's not my way. I feel like there's, a million different ways to skin the cat when it comes to pass rushing. Everybody has what they do and how they get there in different ways. And I think that's the true art and the true beauty of it. I was out at UCLA with Latu and Khalil Mack, who's one of my players too on the Chargers. Obviously, speaks for himself there. He's a Hall of Famer one day. But even him, he sits there and he talks to Latu and he's telling him, hey, if that's the way you get there, I've never done it like that before, but it works for you. So do it your way. To see moments like that, it's that's pretty awesome. And it to me, at the end, like I said, ultimately, if the players are having success, that's my favorite part, is when I get a text from, Kwity or Latu or Dio or whoever it is, and they text me after the game. They're like, oh man, I was on fire today. I had 3 sacks or whatever, 4 quarterback hits. And that's what hypes me up. That's my favorite part of this process.
I'm so glad you brought up Khalil Mack, because I saw on maybe Instagram or Twitter the clip shared of Khalil getting right up there working with Laiatu. What does it say about Laiatu that you have a guy like that, who is that, the pinnacle of that position, who's willing to spend that time hands-on working with Laiatu, and maybe what he sees as Laiatu being one of the new era of pass rushers, in the NFL, alongside maybe a guy like Khalil Mack?
I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Like passing a so-called passing of the torch, right? When it comes to these type of guys, like I personally think Laiatu is one of a kind. I think when it's all said and done, if he stays healthy through this tough, obviously unforgiving game of football, he's going to have a chance to be in a guy like Khalil Mack's shoes, where maybe he's going for a gold jacket one day. So for Khalil to just even, someone that doesn't need to is grabbing him during a session and saying, hey, here's a couple of things that work for me. To me, that just shows that Khalil sees something as well. Whether or not he wants to say it that way, just the action of him saying, hey, look, this is how I do it. To a young rookie like Latu shows a lot. And I think I've said this before, but that's my favorite part of what I do is mixing in these vets that have been doing this for such a long time, that can give, such free game in a sense to these players that are just about to go start their careers. It's so valuable to these guys, even the off the field stuff. And I think, that's great too, because these guys, their lives are changing, especially first round picks. It's completely changing financially. And a lot of my guys are in great financial situations to be able to put their arm around him and say, hey, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing that, you're not doing this. So it's a very well-rounded program in that sense.
I would imagine that there's nothing more, satisfying for you than being a mentor, a coach, a teacher, than to see someone that you've worked with embracing that role as a mentor or a coach, and finding, so much value in being able to do exactly that. And especially with something, like the pass rush, when it is something that there is such great pride in, the practice, the technique of it all, there is certainly no way to replicate the type of wisdom you're going to get from a guy who's been doing it at such a high level for as long as someone like Khalil Mack has, for a rookie like Laiatu.
Absolutely. like I said, my favorite part is just watching guys like that and that's the brotherhood of it, because now they're all connected, especially in the age of social media. Like, these guys all follow each other, whether they train one time together or 30 times together. And now they're all connected just because they all train, whether it's with me or with the same people. So I love seeing that stuff. And they'll follow each other throughout the year. And, they'll comment on each other's videos and posts and hype each other up. And no, it's great. It's a great brotherhood.
Is that one of the really cool aspects maybe of being interconnected, social media, all the different mediums that there are, in that no matter where you are, I'm sure that, you have young athletes who are able to look up certain videos or look at maybe what guys are doing, like a young Latu was wanting to try to replicate those things and taking such pride in using that practice and implementing it, no matter, where you are, if you have access to a training group or you don't, that you at least have the ability to look up those types of things and, utilize that within your own preparation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I encourage everybody to go out there and, watch other people. That's really what Latu talks about in his development. He watched guys like he's obsessed with the way Max Crosby rushes the quarterback. But who isn't? You know what I mean? And if you can pick a thing up, you might not necessarily be able to do what those guys do all the time, but if you can just pick up one little thing, it's only going to benefit you. So I encourage all young defensive linemen all the time, hey, watch these guys work in the off season. Watch how they train, watch how they play on Sundays. Or if you're a high school kid and you are watching a young man like Laiatu in college, watch how he goes about his game, and it's only going to help you. If you don't do that kind of stuff, if you can't sit there and watch those guys and appreciate it, the game might not be for you.
And where can everyone follow you on social media to follow the work that you're doing?
On Instagram, it's D-Line Coach Ed, I think DL Coach Ed, and then on, what is it, Twitter, X? What are we calling it these days?
Yeah.
X, Twitter. It's a D-Line Coach Ed. I try to stay a little active on there and post every now and then some training videos of the guys, but yeah.
I know we've done a couple of different posts and things that we've shared from ours as well. So it's all in our Colts timeline also. Hey, can we get you? I know you're out on the West Coast, but do you think we can get you to a Colts game at some point this season?
I'm coming. 100%. I'm locked in. It was the Miami Dolphins game. I think it's like help me out, October 7th, 19th.
October 20th. Your flight's
there you go. Because I knew I got my flight. Yeah, okay. Me and my girlfriend are coming out. We're gonna see the guys. We're gonna be there. Hopefully they get us out on the sideline and give us some guest pass, so we can tour the facility. But I got to make sure I press them about that. Get Kwity to help us
early. I think we can make it happen. We got some people who can hook you up for sure. Eddy, thank you so very much for the time. Really appreciate it. All of your insight and everything, all the work that you're doing. So cool to see the impact and the growth there is within this defensive line group, especially. Can't wait to see those guys get out there and get after it, starting at training camp next week up at Grand Park. Appreciate the time.
I appreciate you. Make sure you stay on those guys at training camp. Make sure you stay on them.
You got Coach Eddy sent me.
I love it. Yeah.
All right, excitement everywhere around with this man and what he's going to do to help these young Colts players and stuff. How was that for you? What was the biggest thing that you learned that you didn't know going in?
I think for me, it was his endorsement, strongly so, of Kwity Paye and the position that he has put himself in going into this season. A lot about Laiatu are things that we knew, but I think one thing is, if they're going to Laiatu, is how raw he was coming in to start working with Coach Eddy, and then the development that he made, but also when he was so raw and had such a high ceiling, already Eddy was blown away by the things that he was able to do, primarily being self-taught. We've heard him talk about learning off of YouTube videos, different things like that. So Eddy talked about just, not overcomplicating a lot of the great things he was already doing, just refining those aspects. But to me, all of the things he said about the shape that Kwity is in, not just physically, but mentally going into this season, I think is incredibly exciting, especially because this is the first offseason in which they've worked together that Kwity has been completely healthy. So that is significant in terms of what you're going to get from him going into this season. A few other things. I had to start like pulling out my notepad and jotting things down because we'd stopped recording and then we're talking like for another 10 minutes. Like this guy's energy is infectious. And in talking to him about Coach Charlie Partridge, the new defensive line coach, he said, we're cut from the same cloth when it comes to our philosophy with the pass rush. He said he is about his business with a coach that's as experienced, as seasoned, as respected as Coach Partridge is. Like, he doesn't let little things slip. Like, he is never going to let something go. He is all about creating the right habits, and that comes from, like, ground up. He said it's really a perfect storm for this defense, having both Latu and Coach Partridge coming in this offseason to take this defensive line to another level. He also told me that he and Coach Partridge talk frequently. He has the utmost respect for Gus and how he operates as a defensive coach, and he's really excited for now Coach Gus Bradley to have this personnel that he's now equipped with. And I think when I'm looking at, kind of storylines for this defense, it is the frequency of disruption with your defensive front, especially out of the gates with, I'm going to isolate the first 3 weeks of the season. The quarterbacks that you have to face, you get CJ Stroud week 1. You're going to go up to Green Bay and face Jordan Love week 2. And then in week 3, it's Caleb Williams, right? Like, this is a gauntlet of very talented, young, dynamic quarterbacks that are going to have this defense proving themselves early on. And I think we have, in the past, we have somewhat seen, what's the storyline going into week 1 almost each and every year? That sluggish start to the season, not getting out fast enough, not coming out, foot on the gas, all of those things. And, in talking to Coach Eddy, his saying, like, you don't want to play from behind. They have an offense now that will allow this defense to get after the passer because it's a better balance in terms of what you're equipped to do offensively, and you're not getting yourself, you shouldn't be, I guess I should say, getting yourself into these, 2-score, 3-score type of deficits.
That's a really, really good point, just about how, you can't just isolate the pass rush, right? It's got to be the entirety of the team. And it's a lot easier to rush the passer when you got a lead than when you don't. That's proven. I mean, how many sacks did Freeney and Mathis get when they were closing out games in the fourth quarter, and Peyton Manning had given them a lead and said, "Here you go." That stuff really does matter for a pass rush. The thing that I'm going back to with this pass rush is, I know we've talked a lot about depth, and we've talked a lot about, okay, you've got. Here's kind of your starting 4, but then you can roll in Dio Dangbo and Taekwon Lewis and Raekwon Davis and these guys who are really, really good rotational pieces who are going to make an impact. I still want the Colts to get that double-digit sack guy, whoever that is, whether that's a jump from Kwity Paye, a jump from Samson Ebukam, Dio, Laiatu coming out of the gate strong. The Colts have not had a double-digit sack player. I don't know a better way to say that, by the way.
Double-digit
like a guy
sack
with
artist?
double-digit sacks.
A sack artist?
Maybe.
Double-digit sacker?
Double-digit sacker since 2019. That was just in Houston. That's the 4th longest drought in the NFL. Ahead of only,
he's still in the NFL too, by the way, isn't he?
He was playing
around.
last season, yeah.
That's only behind the Seahawks, Broncos, and Falcons, or ahead of those teams.
JJ, are you disappointed if this group, Charlie Partridge, Coach McGilvra, Latu, are you disappointed at all if this group doesn't get 51 sacks and breaks yet another record the following year?
I'm not. I think the sacks will come.
Yeah.
The sacks are going to come. And look, you're talking about back-to-back sacks or 50-plus sack seasons are really hard to do. That is really hard to do. But what I want to see, and we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, is that uptick in pressure rate.
That's it.
Like you mentioned, Larra, the uptick in disruption. Okay, maybe you don't get a sack.
Sacks are just one measurable.
Right.
It's a flashy one. Everyone loves that, right? We love that stat, but there are so many other measures of an effective defensive front.
Think about here's the sequence that's just like seared into my mind. Is week 18 against Houston. Ronnie Harrison Jr. comes screaming off the edge. He sacks C.J. Stroud for a loss of 10.
Yeah.
It's 2nd and 20. And Stroud's able to complete 2 passes to get a first down out of that.
Right.
And there wasn't a whole lot of pressure on those.
And this year that will change.
That's where, okay, you got him in 2nd and 20, keep attacking.
It's
not just one isolated sack. It's a sack and pressure. It's pressure.
You easily hand in 10 sacks a year to go down to 41. I'm just saying in the Colts, if you can add, 15% more pressure on plays that the quarterback was not even, worried about being touched by anybody.
The flip side to that is then getting that that one guy who, and I think Buck is probably the closest the Colts have to this, but that one guy who offensive coordinators are just, God, we have to play this guy this week. I gotta change up my whole protection plan because they're playing like the Colts have had in the past. Trey Hendrickson, TJ Watt.
Look at the frequency that he's double teamed.
Right.
That tells you how much of a worry that he is for offensive coordinators.
It is. I think it's a little bit different when it's an interior guy.
Yeah.
Versus a guy on the edge, where you can double team him with the guard in the center and then single everyone else up, and you can still get your running back out in routes. I want the guy on the edge who it's like, man, it's 3rd and 7, and I would love to get all 5 guys out in the route, but we got to keep our running back in to chip and release, because I can't trust that player X is going to block the guy in the Colts.
Right.
Like, that's what you would love to see. Now, that's not like a prerequisite for a good season. And you can still have a very impactful season as a defensive front without having that guy. I think if the Colts are starting to fancy themselves as a real contender in the AFC, though, I think that's a guy you would love to see emerge on this team.
I mean, don't you think, given the career that he had collegiately and looking at the defensive line that he's joining, that to some degree, when these coaches are starting to think about the season, they're already to some degree accounting for Latu to be a wrecker.
I think you kind of have to.
Right? I know he hasn't played a game yet. He hasn't suited up yet, but you're like, okay, this is something we likely need to account for and anticipate.
Every team probably scouted Latu to some extent.
No question.
Right? Because you're thinking he could go anywhere in the draft based on the medical concerns, which the Colts obviously are comfortable with. But
half of the teams, with that medical thing you're talking about, half of them said we're out.
But even then, when you're looking at the tape, you're looking at him and be like, man, this guy, he's good.
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone could look at his tape and say that guy's not a really good pass rusher.
It's also just that so many teams were so offensive smitten.
Yeah, right.
Well,
That's the other thing. It wasn't anything about him. It was just we want quarterbacks and receivers.
So I mean. But I think all these teams that did scout Latu, which I think is probably most of the league,
you have to, yes,
are going to say, this guy's really good. And when we go into week whatever, we got to have a plan for this guy. Because when we scouted him, when we looked at him, when our defensive coordinator put on his tape, he was like, whew, this guy's really good. So that's going to be an interesting kind of subtext to it. What I want to see, though, and maybe it's not, maybe I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth with the double-digit sack guy, but I want to see like this come in waves. Like I think sometimes you see with rookies, you get off to this really hot start, then the league adjusts to you. Okay, if the league is going to adjust to Latu in week 5, week 6, okay, can Kwity and Dio come on then? Can Samson come on then? And you keep that one guy just rolling, where maybe it's not that one singular guy, but every week there's a guy on the edge who you're just like, He's on fire. He's playing great right now. We have to account for him in ways that we don't want to.
Right. Guys, let's say on the defensive side of the ball, camp is coming up. The storylines are everywhere. Let's go to put your thinking caps on for a minute and pick a veteran on the defensive side of the ball that maybe not be a huge storyline at Grand Park, but somebody that is going to bring it. We take this guy for granted type thing without talking about him a lot. What do you think?
I mean, we were just talking about the defensive line, and I mentioned DeForest Buckner like twice.
Hey, that's a good one to go on.
Let's not lose sight.
Yeah.
And like through all this of me saying, I want the double-digit sack guy, all that, the pressure. DeForest Buckner's really, really freaking good.
Yeah.
He's a really good football player who generates pressure from the interior. He is a menace to defend. If he gets you one-on-one,
look out.
And you give him, if you give Buck multiple opportunities in a game, one-on-one, he is going to hit home on at least one of them. Because he's going to set it up. He's going to hit that trademark swim move. He's going to get in the backfield and do something. And then Grover Stewart. Like that Buck and Grove duo that we've become so used to here since 2020, let's not lose sight of how good they are.
Yeah, right. They're still
how
there.
There are some practices up at Grand Park that we've seen over the years where it's just like it's an awful day for the offense, and it's because of two guys. It's
Right.
because of Buck and Grove. And it's like,
You're right.
couldn't keep him out of the backfield. Remember that one? This was like my first training camp era where Grove tipped a screen pass to himself, and he picked it off
Yes!
and ran it back for like a pick six.
Yeah.
Like Grove during like training camp Grove, give
on.
me a Q versus Grove
Oh, good
one-on-one
God.
Yeah, let's go.
battle. Those are, I can't wait.
One thing, there's just a report that came out. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler was ranking best at each position, and he put DeForest Buckner among the top 10 defensive tackles in the league. It's like, and this is an accumulation of a bunch of people who voted and contributed. He comes in at number 8 on Fowler's rankings. Top 5, you've got like Chris Jones at number 1, Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah.
But Fowler writes, Buckner has been, quote, the model of consistency, not only since he joined the Colts in 2020, but throughout his career. In 4 seasons, recorded at least 7 sacks each season, including 8 in the last 2 seasons, and averaged almost 54 quarterback pressures each of those seasons as well. Like just a couple of, and this is like this is in the last like 24 hours that this report came out.
And
so,
the TFLs that he gets against the run.
For sure.
Yeah.
A menace. Larra, anybody keeping your eye on?
So Grover, for me, kind of to piggyback on what JJ said, I picked 2. I cheated a little bit. I think that Grover, and we hear the guys like, stomping for him every year for Pro Bowl voting and all of those things that are so well deserved based on what he does. Just looking at, his last season, and he even, missed a couple of games last season, of course, but just like the tackle numbers, 5 TFLs, right? 8 quarterback hits for Grover. So he's a stalwart there up front, and I think that to some degree he gets overshadowed because of DeForest and what he's able to do, but that's a good guy to get overshadowed by. And those two have like the most fun dynamic right there, like that synergy between the two of them. The other guy who I'm going to toss into this mix, who I don't think we have the opportunity to talk nearly enough about, and he is, in my opinion, going to put the league on notice, it's EJ Speed. I thought the season he had last year was monstrous. And I think that when you have seen the very steady trajectory of a guy like Zaire Franklin, and then you see what EJ Speed is doing alongside him, like this guy last season, obviously like combined for 102 tackles, 12 TFLs from him. Like it's just,
You know what my favorite number that he had last year?
The sack?
3 forced fumbles.
There you go. 3 forced
Yeah.
fumbles. Yes, exactly. Yes. Like he is one to me that I think that you have seen, and I never want to, you don't want to compare anyone specifically to another, but, for so long we saw the, game wrecker that Shaquille Leonard had been within this defense, the way he was able to take the ball away and create pressure on opposing offenses. And I think that, no one is going to be the maniac, and you don't want to put that like expectation because of the ridiculous seasons that obviously that he had. But you do look at, obviously they have that kind of similar style about them and EJ Speed. So I think that he is very much positioning himself to be that complementary piece in the linebacking unit alongside Zaire Franklin, to be that, no pun intended, 1-2 punch.
I also think it's just like under this category of like the players who we shouldn't take for granted. Like, what a testament to Kenny Moore II and Zaire Franklin that like they're also part of this category. That you're just like, you can set it and forget it with those two guys in this defense and be like, they're going to be pillars in the defense. They're going to be team leaders. They're going to put up great seasons, and you don't have to worry about it for an undrafted free agent and a 7th-round draft pick.
Right. That's amazing.
Just remarkable for those two guys.
I'm going to throw my hat in the ring with Samson Ebukam, getting pushed by a rookie, a number 1 draft choice, 15th overall, a new defensive line coach in Charlie Partridge. He knows what time it is. He's a veteran. He played well last year, and that's the sort of depth that room needs, is this guy to be up there with the 8-9 sacks potentially, like he's brought in years past. So I'm going to keep my eye out for Samson. Obviously, Kwity, got the extension for this year. Next year, we find out what happens. So he's going to be playing with his tail on fire as well. So that's going to be fun. We talked about it earlier in the show, the kickoffs. Very quickly, are we going to see this thing, the kickoff, the new kickoff rules with the NFL, JJ? Will we see this thing kind of, we don't know what it's going to be just yet, but we got to kind of cook it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to find out what it is. Is it going to change preseason game to preseason game?
Yes, it will. It's going to be a learning on the fly for the entire NFL, because even you could sort of work on it during OTAs, but there's no pads. So you can't really get a feel for the speed of it, for the physicality that you're going to encounter of it. And really, I mean, during training camp, it's going to be a little hard to work on it in those practices, because you're not going to go full hitting potentially, with those. So really, it's the preseason games. Like, usually preseason games, you're kind of like, all right, let's get the offense, defense, some work, get them out of there, and then you stop paying attention. The kickoffs, you better be tuning in for every single kickoff in these games, because it's going to be, okay, hey, let's figure out who's going to be back there first and foremost, right? Like, is it going to be Dallas Flowers? Is it going to be Anthony Gould back there? Is it going to be someone else back there? and then figure out who's going to be. Are you going to have Matt Gay kicking it off? I saw that report that Kansas City was thinking about having Eric Reed do it. Now, Eric Reed has a little bit of kicking experience, but he's a safety. And it's like, well, if you need all 11 guys to tackle.
I don't know why. When you said Eric Reed, my mind went to Andy Reid, and I was like, well, that would be a move.
That would be
we've
fun.
seen Andy Reid in the punt passing competition,
He
so
could do
he
it,
could do it.
Yeah, if you have not seen that clip, like Google Andy Reid punt pass kick. It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
And he's like,
there's a 6'7" adult, and then there's
12-year-old out there.
4'10".
Yeah, I
kids,
was like,
you know.
I was like,
But
oh, Andy Reid.
personnel on these things is going to be a big deal.
Sure.
It's not going to be your traditional kickoff coverage, kickoff return personnel that we've seen in years past.
We heard coordinators across the league in OTAs and minicamp say that they were trying out like receivers. You're talking running backs. A few even were saying they threw a tight end back there just to see. I think that this is for sure like a trial and error type of situation.
They have, like, going into camp, a loose depth chart of who's on kickoff, who's on kickoff return. I think the time that's being spent during this camp at Grant Park, more time has to be spent on these new rules and the setup with it, because
but even then,
some of these guys, that's what I'm saying. We're not getting 7-on-7 as much as we want. We might be getting more special teams play.
I don't think so.
No?
Because I think you can't really simulate it until you get into a game.
I do think the joint practices could be an interesting measure.
Yeah.
I really think when you get Arizona
You're right.
in here for those two practices up at Grant Park, that'll be interesting to me with how they're handling it and how you're going to see those two go head to head.
You can get a little more physical in those.
You can. And it's just also your first opportunity to see what another team is doing.
Exactly.
Flat out personnel wise, what they're doing, how they're handling it, how they're scheming for it.
And then you wonder, okay, now you kind of get into this like wheels within wheels thing of like, are coaches going to hold back their strategy from preseason games? Are you going to but also, do you need to just try it?
Yes.
Because if you get to week 1 and it's like we've held everything back behind closed doors, and then you get to week 1 and we haven't actually practiced live contact on these, is that going to be a problem? I don't know.
Here's what I think. I think that so many teams will be forced to try things out that there's going to be such an experimentation that there's really no clear cut, this is what they're going to do, because the rotation will be so heavy with trying various things that you can get away with really being pretty honest, but not totally tipping your hand because of, what we're going to see and how it's going to be manipulated and changed over those, critical, 4 weeks, 5 weeks or so.
Yeah, this isn't like, on offense where you run these like bland concepts and we're not showing you anything. It's like you can be honest, like you said, Larra, because we're being honest in that this might not be what we do anyways when the season starts.
Yeah, we might put a guy out there and try it out there, and he may not end up being on the 53 because this might not work the way that we want. But we certainly have to try it out because we got to find that out week 2 of camp, week 3 of camp, and not week 1, 2, 3 of the season.
We have to be open to this. This is a new angle of NFL football.
The trial
guys,
is going to go into the regular season.
I'll say, though, I think that Brian Mason, special teams coordinator, of course, here for the Colts, is really well suited with this because he is such like – I don't know if it was savant, but like he is very
a mad scientist.
He's a
mad
scientist with these type of things. Yes, like he's incredibly cerebral with how he approaches these things. And when we had him back here in studio, as soon as this was announced, he was launching into it, and you could see like the wheels are turning, things were working, all of those things. Like I think that it's really interesting because of Brian's experience, obviously navigating between college football now to the NFL, taking influences from what they have seen with this model, similar in the XFL. It's going to be kind of an interesting merger of all of those things in his mind and how that works for him alongside Joe Hastings.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Like I said, NFL fans, they like their steak medium well every time they eat it. And now it's like, hey, wait a minute. It's a little bit medium rare. I don't know. Is that okay? You like that analogy when I go to steak?
I know
Summertime
you're
grilling.
a briquette guy, but like
summertime, you know what I'm saying?
I went to Commission Row, got a medium rare steak. It was great. You should try it sometime.
I like it a little bit done, but you know what I'm saying.
Wait, hold on. I want to go like off football for just a second because we have like kind of this like final summer soiree. You had a great little visit to the ballpark, right, with your boys just recently.
I did. Took them to their first Major League game. We went up to Sox Park to go watch the White Sox lose to the Pirates.
Okay.
They had a blast.
Skeens pitch?
No, unfortunately. Yeah, some guy I never heard of pitch for the Pirates.
They're holding him out for the All-Star game, probably, right?
But still, that's
holding him out for the All-Star game.
That's your
what
team. That's your team. You bring your kids
Sox,
to
yeah.
the. It's great.
But my question comes back to Jeffrey here. Did you get a dog at the ballpark? How do you order your dog, and how do the Stank boys order the dogs?
The
boys, hold on. The boys order their dogs, no bun. Charlie's just holding the hot dog, taking bites out of it.
Great.
Them old Stank boys. I like that.
Henry opted for the beef because he is my kid.
Okay.
So he had your boiled beef.
Sure.
Delicious. With some giardiniera. He didn't have the giardiniera.
Was it Portillo's? Do they offer Portillo's?
No, it's
there?
Bona.
Oh, okay.
Bona beef.
Got it.
Great stuff up in Chicago. Bona beef.
Still boiled?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very well boiled.
Just saying.
I got my hot dog with in Chicago, you'll get offered this like neon green relish. It's definitely got some chemicals in it, but man, it's good. It's better than regular relish.
Yeah, can't do it. No, exactly
some
what you're
onions
talking
and
about.
Mustard.
Almost put that in
Okay.
my car one day, to be honest with you, to get that engine rolling.
You probably get
Don't
some
know
good
what
gas
that is.
mileage on it.
It's a great question, by the way, and I'm so. Can I answer this, please? Double row of yellow mustard on both sides. One
Attaboy.
row, 2 rows.
Yep.
Dog in the middle.
Okay.
All day.
That's all
right
you need.
there. Just a slab of mustard.
Great.
Bratwurst, same thing involved. No, you know.
Okay.
But I love that. Yeah, good job on you bringing your kids to the game. Those kids will remember that for the rest of their lives. I remember my first Detroit Tigers game with my dad way back in the day. So well done.
Yeah, unfortunately, the White Sox are terrible.
Yeah.
And they lost.
Do the boys know that their father is a Major League Baseball 1999 through 2013 savant when it comes to Major League Baseball?
Legitimately, I'm not kidding you. I have actually searched for a Raul Mondesi Toronto Blue Jays 4T jersey because I was one day sitting up in bed and I was like, you know what'd be really funny is to get him like a random jersey from when I was growing up.
You should.
Couldn't find it.
Absolutely. Or get him a Brian Fuentes jersey.
Yeah, you're still mad
Don't
about
get
that.
me started. I thought I had him on Fuentes. That's another story. But guys, all right, Colts reunion's coming up on the Colts Audio Network on Wednesday. We got the last word with Dallas Clark, who's going into the Colts Ring of Honor. Matt Taylor and I had a chance to catch up with him. That's also on the Colts Audio Network. What do you got? What do you guys got for me before we say goodbye for a long weekend? Because the next time you're going to hear and see from us, it'll be one day before that camp breaks. That's next week. Or camp opens.
Working on some great things in terms of training camp arrival and all of that. So we will be inundating your feeds, come next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with all of the camp content coming in. Exciting stuff with the guys getting back in to the building, getting to work, all of that. So we will have some exclusive access for all of those things.
Working on just some training camp previews.
Yep.
Kind of a lot of what we talked about on this podcast just in writing on Colts.com. Let's pump your Dallas Clark interview too, by the way.
That's
you got
that's
a
a good
chance
one.
to sit down with Dallas Clark for the last word on Friday.
That's coming up on Friday. You can find it on Colts.com as well on the Colts Audio Network. But Dallas is overwhelmed, and it was a great interview that we just caught up with him on. He had no idea this thing was coming. Hell, he said, I had no idea I was even going to get drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL. So, getting the Ring of Honor thing. Anyway, that's available on the Colts Audio Network as well. And next time you hear from us, we'll be one day from reporting to Graham Park.
And on that official podcast next week, we're going to be previewing the offense.
Yes, good.
And I'm going to have a conversation with one of Twitter's foremost Anthony Richardson supporters, Nate Tice from Yahoo Sports.
Nate Tice, okay.
Love this.
Quarterback guru, just a football guru.
Right.
A guy who I've listened to a lot on his podcast from The Athletic, now at Yahoo. Really excited to talk with him about Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen. Going to have some exciting stuff.
Next week, be sure to listen for that. The official Colts podcast will be coming at you next week, and then we flip it over to training camp, and all heck breaks loose, but it's fun. I'll see you in the lunchroom. I'll also see you walking from our 450-yard walk to our cars and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Can't wait for it. But, guys,
I always
thanks
get my
for
steps in at camp.
Yeah, for sure. At Larra Overton on Twitter X, at JJ Stankevitz. Be sure to follow him on social media as well, and obviously on Colts.com, you get it. Thanks, guys. I know we threw a lot on you today, a lot on your plate, but getting these Colts fans ready, and myself included, for the season, these guys are the best in the business, so make sure you follow them. We'll talk to you next week.